Welcome to NICTITATIng Presents, an interview series with genre authors. My guest today is Emma Jane Gibbon. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there.
That's good to hear. So your book, Dark Blood Comes from the Feet, came out from Trepidatio Publishing a couple months ago.
Yes, it came out in May.
Okay. And so yeah, that's why we have you on right now. Before I get into everything else, I have to know, how did you come up with the idea for the title?
So the title is from one of this is not a spoiler. The title's a line from Cellar Door, which is a story in the book. And the the narrator is describing she goes for a Reiki session, and when she goes to the Reiki session, the practitioner was doing this session on it, and she's quite skeptical about it when she goes. And the practitioner says that she can see all the woman's old trauma coming out from her feet, that she can see like dark blood pouring out of her feet. And so it comes from that line, from that memory in the book. The thing with that memory that the narrator has that she talks about is actually that's my memory. That actually happened to me. So I went for a Reiki session, and it was a gift from someone, and I'm one of these people who, like, I want to believe that something will happen, but I'm quite
Same, yeah.
skeptical as well. So I tried, yeah, I tried to keep an open mind, and I went, and I didn't feel anything the whole time. And then at the end, she stepped back, and looked at her, and she said that she could see dark blood pouring from my feet, like old, old blood. And then went later, and the character in the story says this as well. But so I thought that, I was very skeptical. I thought nothing had happened. And when I was walking back out of there, back to the bus station, it was a really sunny day. I started getting really cold and got like hot, like really shivering, freezing for a couple of hours afterwards. So it was a really weird experience that stuck with me. So I gave the narrator in Salvador my memory. So it's from that.
Yeah, that's pretty creepy. I mean, I would have figured it just was like an evocative phrase. I mean, it is, but
Yeah, I mean it is, but it's something that obviously that was years and years and years ago. So like over a decade ago. So that phrase really stuck with me all this time. So and I thought it was a good time.
no, I think it's a good idea to do titles, or at least to try to do titles of personal
Hmm.
relevance.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I haven't had time to read all of the collection. I read the first couple stories. I really like the first one about, I don't want to spoil anything, but it's sort of like a supernatural thing about strippers. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I can, and it's kind of a spoiler, but the spoiler's kind of out there anyway, in other interviews. Um, and it's from the get go. Like there's no twist or anything. But
Yeah, no, it's not like
yeah,
it's not exactly a twist. It's sort of from the beginning you get the sense.
yeah. So it's basically it's Purgatory as a strip club. So there's a group of women in there who are strippers, and it's Purgatory. And so it's a story about how that goes for them, and whether they know they're there and whether they know where they are. So yeah,
I mean, it works, it's like it gets your attention from the jump. You're
yeah,
like, okay, huh?
yeah. It was actually so the. I mean, that's why I wanted to put that story first, because it's not some of my other stories build up as the stories go on in a more traditional sense, but that one is you're in there, um you're in the scene as soon as it starts. But it was actually inspired by and way a lot of my stories are inspired by stuff like that. It was inspired by an episode of Ghost Adventures. So which I unironically like. I've watched all of them. I do like it. And they were in a what was allegedly a haunted strip club. But the thing is that it's quite. They were like the presenters were they were like kind of giggling like schoolboys because they're in a strip club. Um, but at the same time, like it was quite a serious subject. Like apparently there was a woman who had committed suicide in the dressing room, um, and the whole thing was very and so there was that. It was that inspired it. Like I wanted to write a story which took, you know, that was not that was not about giggling at people because of what they do for a job. That it's more about the characters themselves and them and centering it on them and so that was the inspiration originally for that one.
Yeah, I mean, like it's fairly short too. I like it. It's sort of. I mean, I usually like just as a personal preference, short story collections where they kind of start with maybe a flash piece or like a shorter piece that like kind of instantly grabs your attention. I know, people do it in several ways. Sometimes people will start with like a novella length thing as the first story. But yeah, I just personally prefer the short little, and I thought it worked really well, kind of like opening things up.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to be like, this is gonna be this book's gonna be weird. So so we just like throw you in at the deep end from the start.
Yeah, it sort of establishes like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Um, and I like, I'm a big, I have a cat. I've had cats most of my life, so I liked the next story too about the cat. I'll be a little vaguer with that one, but do you have a cat?
I do. And I have a cat that this is so the cat in the story is the cat called Rufus, and I have a cat that is exactly like Rufus. But the character of that cat precedes me getting the real life cat. So I wrote about this cat. This story, the original version of it is really quite old. But it's changed over the years. It's changed dramatically. But that character of that black cat called Rufus um, was there was my husband lived in before we got together. My husband lived in an apartment, and there was a black cat that used to come over and visit him, and he didn't own it. We had no idea who. And we used to call that cat Rufus, even though it wasn't his name, but we didn't know.
Right,
And so
yeah.
it came from that, and then like years later, I end up with a cat that's exactly like the one in the that I've described. So yeah, I do have a black cat exactly like Rufus, but he's not called Rufus.
Oh, so it's like art imitating life.
Yeah, yeah, and vice versa.
Well, I mean, hopefully not entirely.
No, no. If anybody's read the story, then no, that's not a thing. But yeah, the original cat was another cat.
Yeah, that's funny. So I wanted to ask you, you're an expat, you're originally from England and you moved to the US. What part of England did you grow up in again?
In Yorkshire, so northern England.
Okay, so you grew up in northern England and you currently live in Maine.
Yes.
Well, I guess the first question would be like, what prompted the whole move? Because that's a huge endeavor.
Yeah, it was a big move. And it wasn't really planned. I didn't plan to move to America. I met my husband is from here, so we met each other on a writing forum. Actually, remember forums? We met each other on a writing forum and became friends first, and then eventually, met in real life and things like that, and got married. So I moved over here um, to marry him basically. So. I changed. I got married. I changed countries. I changed careers at the same time. So it was a massive, massive change.
I imagine there were some things that were hard to get used to. I imagine there was a bit of a transition. Is there anything you can remember specifically, like that you went through, just in terms of getting used to living in America versus England and where you live specifically?
Yeah. Well, the first thing was the snow, obviously, because I live in Maine. So the first time I ever visited my husband here, it was in January, and I remember we were in the car and we were in the parking lot of like local local store, and I was like, this is Fargo. I'm moving to Fargo. It was completely like just snow everywhere, and I'm not, and I wasn't, where I'm from in England. It's not that there isn't snow, but it's a lot less than in Maine, and it just rains a lot more. So that was the initial one was like it. And the other thing which me and my husband were laughing about when I first time I visited, I thought all the guys looked like Stephen King. So I was like, everybody looks like Stephen King here, which I don't think so now, but at the time, and the other thing was everything. Like my husband drove me to his where he grew up, and he grew up, basically in the woods. So that was so everything was really spread out, and as we were driving around his hometown, which is basically all woods and dirt roads, my initial thought was, you could totally get murdered. You could get murdered here.
Oh yeah, no, I've been. Yeah, I grew up in Massachusetts, but we used to go to Maine every summer.
Yeah,
But my grandfather grew up in Maine, and yeah, there were times
yeah,
we got lost, like driving to where we were staying.
yeah,
And yeah, you end up on like weird little dirt roads with forests, and you're like, where am I?
yeah, yeah. So we have this running joke where because me and my husband met on the internet at a time when people didn't, but it's a lot more normal now. My mum was like kind of convinced he was a serial killer. And we've been together 11 years now. We've been married 11 years. We've been together a lot longer. And he just tells her that he's playing the long game.
Well, that's funny because
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking. I was like,
yeah,
he's just gonna, he's like
yeah, yeah. He keeps
biding
telling
the time.
he's playing the
That's a
long
terrible joke, but yeah.
game.
Yeah, that's really interesting though. I don't know. I
Yeah,
mean, I can't imagine what it'd be like to move to a different country, like even that aspect of it.
yeah. It's the thing is with the main difference is the little things. Like so I mean for most of my life, I lived in England, but we had American music, American films, a very
Yeah, I mean, it's the same here. Like, I
yeah,
know some things about England and British culture from, media or, music or whatever, but I imagine it's not the whole picture,
no,
obviously.
no, and there are massive difference. It tiny little things that you wouldn't think of that you need to get used to. So stuff like how the washing machine works is different, or paper, stationery, printing paper. They're different sizes, or how you write a check is different. How you write the date.
I had no idea about that. How is it
Yeah,
different?
so paper or a check or which one or the date.
Oh, the I guess the Czech one.
So I'm trying to remember how you write it now. It's like where you sign is different. And I have to remember to do the date correctly because instead of,
Oh, right, yeah, because you write the
yeah,
date differently in Europe or England.
yeah, and then the little, you write in Britain, you write like say, 10 pounds only, whereas here you write $10 and then do the little fraction at the end of the
Oh, the little drawing. Yeah, okay. I didn't realize, there are some things you take for granted.
totally, and I'm stalling because I can't. I've not written a British check in like 11, 12 years now, so I've forgotten how to do it. But I know that it was. I've messed up before. Like when we were renting an apartment, I wrote a check for the landlord and he couldn't cash it because the date was wrong and things like that. So it's the little things like that getting used to, and that was. I mean, aside from the fact that I've had to modify how I speak because certain words they're just different words and things like that. But it's the little things of going around. Oh, and the address. So when you on an envelope you put your address on the in the top left.
Yeah.
And you don't do that; it goes on the back. So even
I was on the back. Wow, yeah, that would screw me up. I'd screw that up if I moved.
it really does. Like it's the tiny weird little things that you wouldn't even think of that are different.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've never been to the UK. I've only been to Romania. So I have this totally weird, well, that's like Eastern Europe. But yeah, like, I went and everybody was like, what's with the guns? And I remember being like, I mean, they're around. I don't own any. But it was like over and over. That was the main question I got was like, what's with all the guns? And I'm like, dude, I don't know. Like, so it's funny to picture people like,
Yeah, that was
they just think every American has a bunch of guns or something. And I'm like, that's not everybody.
yeah. I had that question of when it was like, so have you bought a gun? No.
I mean, like, it's definitely like, we definitely have a shitload of guns in America. And it's definitely something you need to get used to if you're from pretty much anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
But, like, Maine is not, people own guns in Maine, but it's not like the South.
No. So yeah, that is a thing. It's when I moved to Maine, the only people from back home, the only thing British people know about Maine are Stephen King and Murder She Wrote. That was another thing.
Was that set in Maine? I didn't even
Yeah,
realize
exactly.
that.
But it's not really like Maine at all. But yeah, they were like, "So you're moving to where Murder She Wrote is?" And I'm like, "Well, not really." So yeah,
No, I like Maine. I mean, but it's especially for New England, it's like a huge state,
yeah, yeah,
which is interesting. I personally moved from Massachusetts, which is one of the smaller states,
yeah,
to New Mexico, to the southwest. And even that, like,
yeah,
it's very, very different. There's just so much more space.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's all that is. But yeah, so that's interesting. So I assume you like it because you're still around.
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I love living here. Yeah, I it puts you in a strange position because you miss things about both things. So it's like so you're like kind of a little homesick all the time.
Yeah. No, I get that. I mean, if I want to see my mom or my dad now, I gotta fly 2,000 miles or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. And at the same time, when I go to England now, I miss here, and because this is my home, and also because I've lived here long enough now where things have changed back in England, so I don't quite fit in there either. So it puts you in like a thing where you miss things no matter where you are.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I know especially during the summer, I get really sad that I can't just go to an ocean, because I'm obviously in a landlocked state now. Back in Massachusetts, you drive an hour, you're in Cape Cod and like some of the most beautiful beaches in the world.
Yeah,
But at the same time, yeah, when I'm in Massachusetts now, like I miss, I don't know, like decent Mexican food. Like there is Mexican food in New England, but it's like you can't compete with like actual Mexican people who are making the Mexican food.
oh, no.
But then alternately, it's
Yeah,
like, yeah, we don't have seafood really here. We'll have like lake trout type of stuff, but it's like you don't want to be getting like shellfish or anything.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's a similar thing, I think. Similar distance probably
yeah.
as well. Wow.
What's that?
But it's probably how long does it take you to fly to Massachusetts to New Mexico?
Generally about, I think, 6 hours, maybe a little more.
So it takes 6 hours to get to England from Boston.
Okay, so it's similar. Yeah, I mean yeah, it's a pain. I mean, but yeah, that's interesting. So, full disclosure, I obviously didn't have time to read the entire collection. Would you say there's like an overarching theme to the collection? I mean, I obviously don't have the full picture because I only read the first two.
Yeah. I think on the one hand, like I try to construct a collection like the ones that I like to read. So I try to get as much variety in there as possible. And also because it was my first collection, I wanted to show what I could do. I wanted to
Right, you
show
want to
the
show
thing. Yeah.
versatility.
But at the same time, there's certain themes and certain things that I do come back to over and over again. Um, I do know that, and I've said this plenty over and over again in different places, but I do like to center people who are not usually the center of stories in my stories. So I like to make sure that, I write stories about people who are not straight, people who are trans, women, older women, women who've not got kids, people who are not white, and that kind of thing. And I do that very consciously. But on the other hand, there's other things that come up that I've not realized that people have pointed out later, and I do know that I come back to subjects again and again, like things like illness, particularly stuff like tuberculosis. I write about that a lot. I write about people the who asking who the monsters. So usually it's the humans who end up being the monsters in my stories and things like that. So I know that I come up with these things over and over again, but other themes I'd not really thought about. So there was one review that said there was a couple that described me as being very feminist short stories, and I'd not consciously done that, but obviously I'm a feminist, so that would come out. Or I spoke to someone on a podcast the other day, and they said that there was a lot of stories about working class people who kind of move up.
I mean, I was gonna say that. Yeah, I mean, you got the strippers
Yeah,
and then the woman that makes soap. So that just
yeah,
obviously
yeah,
from
and
even the
that,
first
and
two.
I'm from a working class background. That does come up over and over again. So while consciously there's not an overarching theme, my because again it ties into that dark blood comes on from the feet, and the woman saying it was like old trauma kind of thing. Well, there's stuff about me, yeah, there's stuff about me that I like. This is a gross,
Yeah, no, okay,
this
that
is
makes
a
sense now.
gross simile, but it's like picking a scab. There's some wounds that you come back to and poke at. It's very clear in the stories the things that I come back to.
No, no, I get it.
And try and tell in different ways. But yeah, it's very often very very unconscious thing. It's only in retrospect when I look back and go, oh yeah, I obviously write about that.
Yeah, it's interesting how that works. Like, my current one, Screaming Creatures, the title is, I just noticed there were a couple stories I had written in this time period of like around 5 years where I went back to that phrase as a reference to like human beings because I just thought like it's kind of tongue in cheek. But I noticed when I compiled all these stories
Yeah,
together that I was like, oh, like a lot of these are about people either like overtly going insane or sort of like going down a path of like just completely obliterating their morals. So I realized like, oh, most of this is about people going nuts. But I wasn't consciously like writing every story like,
yeah,
okay, they're all gonna sort of be about people losing innocence or
yeah,
like losing
yeah,
their minds. I just happened to write a bunch of stuff where it kept coming up.
yeah. That's exactly it. And the same with I tend to do a lot of first person narrative and a lot of unreliable narrators, and I'd not really consciously done that until I put them together as a collection. It was clear that, oh yeah, I do this a lot. But yeah, so yeah, it wasn't planned as such, but it happened anyway. And what's been really interesting, and this has been one of the real payoffs of this, of people reading the book, is that people like pull their own things out of it, and they're not wrong at all. And it's just really interesting to see what people's reactions is to it that you'd not quite thought of, or that what spoke to them the most. And it changes with different people, and it's been a really interesting um, thing to take part in almost. Um, Hearing what's
No, that's interesting what people. Excuse me one second. I'm just gonna let my cat in. She's gonna meow otherwise. Let me give her 5 seconds. She'll want to leave again anyway.
Yeah, I know. I've pushed all mine. Mine are all. I've closed the door in the room, and they're not used to that, so they're all probably, the dogs and the cat are probably going crazy on the other side.
Yeah, that's my. I tried to appease her with some catnip. I was like, maybe if I get you a little sleepy, but it didn't work. The cats really hate a closed door.
Yeah.
Um. Okay, come on, kitty. Don't jump on the computer. Just stay there. All right. Sorry about that. Let me roll it back. What was I saying? Oh, right. Yes. Yeah, it's interesting what people will kind of point out that you wouldn't notice on your own, too. I've had a really weird, I don't know if it's that weird, but reaction to my collection where it's like the last
Yeah.
novelette, the title story. Like I knew it was creepy, but like I kind of went through like all of these are fairly creepy. But I've had more than one person tell me the very last story has given them like an actual nightmare, and I don't know how to feel about it. On the
Yeah.
one hand, part of me is like, yes, like mission accomplished. And then another part
Yeah.
of me is like, well, that's sort of a bummer. I don't want to
Yeah.
I don't want to be like overtly causing mental trauma.
Yeah, I know exactly, because I've had that cellar door in particular. I've had a couple of people said it gave them nightmares, and then I've made people cry a few times, I think, which is, yeah. I've done that in readings as well in person, and that's really,
Oh, that's got to be. I at least haven't had that
yeah,
happen.
that's
Although, you know what? I was reading someone else's story, and I intentionally, like, for the performance, I call it a performance, kind of hopped into this very, like, angry tone because it fit the story, and I had a woman walk out who was in the front row. It was a little over the top in terms of the actual content, too.
yikes.
But that was like, I didn't know how to feel. I was like, part of me was impressed, and
Yeah,
part of me was like, well, that
yeah.
wasn't the intention.
Yeah, that's the thing. But I mean, obviously, like the one that people have said that gave them the nightmares the most is Celador. which is I mean, I'm not giving anything away. It's my version of a haunted house story. So obviously, I want people to be freaked out and scared because that's what that kind of story is. But on the other hand, the house in that story is based on my house because it was easier to describe my house as I was looking at.
Right,
And
yeah.
my husband's like, could you have not done that? Because like there's a what we call the Evil Dead door to our basement in the kitchen, and it features that. So like when he gets up in the middle of the night to get a glass of water, and he knows that the Evil Dead door's behind him, um, it but it. So yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, you're right. On the one hand, you don't want people to freak out, but on the other hand, what are you writing it for if you don't want to give people, if you're writing horror?
No, it's true. I mean, if you're aiming for horror or
Mhm.
weird or whatever, you're trying to invoke strong emotions.
Yeah,
I've done that before, though, too, in terms of just like self inserting to an extent or using places that I know of. Like my first novel, I'm writing about all sorts of stuff that I just went through like as a child, like going to the New England Aquarium and like walking the pier and doing this and that.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. I think it makes the story stronger because there's like an emotional. You can't really fake emotional resonance, whether you're like making it up whole cloth or whether you're like drawing from something in your own life. And I think that usually affects a reader. Like there's this weird kind of connection people have where they can tell if something is like sort of based on real life.
yeah, yeah. I think it was Stephen Graham. I saw an interview with Stephen Graham Jones. I can't remember where now, and he said that whenever like he called it cheating, but I don't think it is. He said whenever he got
I don't
stuck,
think
whenever
so.
he got like didn't know where the story was going, he would insert something of himself in it, like he would put a memory in or something that happened to him or something like that, and then that would kickstart it again. Which I found really. I think it's an interesting thing. Like I can see. I think it's really effective when you do that. And obviously, his writing's amazing, so it clearly works. But yeah, I knew that, especially with that this house, it was. I knew that I could. I mean, it's like a weird. It's like an alternate version of my house in another timeline. That this one that's haunted and other people live in it. So I knew that it would help me. Really get to the heart of the story if I used a place that I
Well,
knew.
I think it also just helps from a very simple, like psychological standpoint, where it's like if you're writing about the place you're sitting
That's it.
in, you're going to be scaring yourself a little
Yeah,
bit and writing like sort of trying to scare yourself. And in turn, I think people can really tell when you're actually kind of freaking yourself out.
yeah, yeah. Because some of the stuff in that story is stuff that I like. I hate basements. Like there is.
Yeah, that is one thing that's an adjustment. Coming from New England, where everything's older, and you have those creepy Victorians and just like the creepy basement kind of thing going on. We moved to New Mexico and we got this ranch style house, and there's no basement. It's just one floor. And I'm like, wow, this is great because I hate
Yeah,
basements. And yeah, I mean,
yeah,
there are things to get used to, like, the air conditioning unit and the heating unit and the water, they're all on the
yeah,
top
yeah. I
floor.
hate basement. I mean, I don't.
But I'll take it because I hate basements.
Yeah, I give me an attic over a basement any day. I'm fine with attic.
See, we have an attic, but I'm sure it's full of black widow spiders, so I would never
So
want to go
maybe
into it.
not that one. We don't have one here. But yeah, I've always disliked. But then again, talking about the old thing, like for me, people here talk about something being old, and because I'm from England, I'm like, well, that's not old. It's not old at all.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, we think of old in terms of like, I don't know, 1900s, 1800s, and you guys are like, that's not that old.
Yeah, yeah. Here's a castle from 1600. So yeah, that's been a thing as well. That the definition of what people think are old is that changes.
Now, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Do you have any stories in the current collection that take place in England, or did you decide, like, okay, I'm just going to set all these in America?
Yeah, no, there's a few. There's one.
Okay.
Let's see. There's one. There's a couple. There's one that's set. There's a few, yeah. It's like a. I'd say it's a. I wonder if it's half. Maybe not half. Less than half, but a few. Like one set in London. One is set in my hometown, and it's based on like an urban legend from my hometown. Um, there's another set in that's like a old-fashioned kind of nested story kind of thing, like an old Gothic story, and that's set there. there's a couple. So yeah, I tend to flip back and forth between. I usually write about places I've been to, um, just because I just find it easier. But so there's like a mixture between American and British, in in the
Okay.
in the thing. And it's not that the older ones are. Um, it's not even that the older ones are England or Britain, and the new ones are American. I just flip, depending on the story, I flip back and forth. And hopefully at some point we'll be able to travel again and I can set it in some other places once, when I've been some more places.
I mean, I think obviously people know that setting is important, but
Yeah,
like at least on my end personally, I didn't realize how important because I grew up in New England, so I would write every story in New England, and I gotta tell you, very hard to like kind of carve your niche because so many horror stories are already set in New England from like so many
yeah,
talented people. And I noticed though when I started writing stories, like I wrote a story that hopped between Detroit and basically like New Mexico.
yeah,
And like it resonated with people. And then it was sort of like a light bulb went off. And I was like, wait, what if I write about other states? Help me. And it sort of has. I mean, it's at least giving me something to sort of make the story my own. Like I've written about Georgia now, New Mexico a couple times. Obviously I've written some stuff in New England because that's just, yeah, same thing. Like I'll hop back and forth between writing about something set in New England and something set in the Southwest or another state.
yeah. I think I've got a couple of, well, they obviously the Limbo's in Limbo Lounges anywhere really. I think I based it on like a Las Vegas place. And then I think there's at least one about that's set in Hollywood. But they're all places that I've been either as a tourist or lived in. I just find it easy. I just find it easier that way. And I have the way that I think more in in dialogue and in concepts than I do in images. So by setting things in places where I've been, it just helped me out with the the description and things. Um, so that you've not got a story that feels like it's taking place in a white box kind of thing. So
Yeah, I mean, I have noticed, interestingly enough, I've written about states I've never been to, but I found it's easier to write about. For instance, I'm writing a novel set in Wyoming in the Red Desert, but it's working because it's the middle of nowhere and
yeah,
it's supposed to be a ghost town. So I can get that sense of dislocation because I literally have
yeah,
never, it is sort of like, a blank space because I've never been there.
yeah,
But at the same time, I guess it would be informed
yeah,
by having lived in the high desert now for a year and, just like all the things that living in a desert kind of teaches you. Like, I mean, there's the obvious stuff, like it's very dry. And then there's the less obvious stuff, like, that like you still will have a winter. Like sometimes it still confuses me. I'm like, wait, we get snow, but it's a desert.
yeah, yeah. And Black Widows in the attic is a thing that
Oh my God, the Black Widows are so hard to get used to.
yeah,
Although it's funny because last year I just went apoplectic because I found some around the perimeter of the house, like outside, and it like freaked me out. Obviously, I was like, "This is awful."
yeah,
And then this year with COVID, I'm so freaked out about that. It's like I found a couple and I haven't even cared. I'm just like, "Oh, it's a poisonous spider."
yeah.
Or venomous. Sorry, my girlfriend reminds me. It's not poisonous, it's venomous if it bites you.
I see. Huh.
I think. I might not even be getting that right. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I wouldn't
No.
know. So have you been working on anything new lately that you can talk about? Like, have you been writing more short stories or have you tried to transition into something longer or what?
Yeah, I'm right. So I'm writing. I've got a couple of things on the go, but one of the things is that I am writing a novel. It's in the really early stages right now. So it's a lot. I've put some preliminary. I've written a the beginning, but a lot of it is the research and things like that. But the way that I write very much in the I can only see the headlights kind of thing, so I can only see what's in front of me. I don't plan very much, so I have a vague notion of things that are happening in it, but until I really get down to start writing it, I don't always know. I know that there's Victorian grave diggers in it, grave snatchers, body snatchers, that's the word. I know that there's a character who's like a 70s rock star who's a woman. And I think there's some kind of an alien abduction in it. But again, until that's where my research is taking me, I won't know until I write it. But that seems to be the areas that are coming up over and over again. So yeah.
So the research has been into UFOs and aliens?
Yeah, basically. I mean, I always, yeah, and I don't even know why yet. I'm sure that the way I do things, if someone's like a huge planner and plans all their stories out, would be just like horrified by the way that I do things, you know? It's just based,
No, I mean, I get it. I've written, especially longer stuff, I've learned I have to have this balance of outlining just enough that I don't
yeah,
derail and just have no idea where I'm going, but
yeah,
I always have to be willing to completely ditch the outline because otherwise I don't know, I'm just like, if I'm writing and it goes a certain direction, I'm like, that's the direction it's supposed to go.
yeah, that's it. You don't want to hem yourself in by a plan that, you know, that you made. Um, So yeah, so I always kind of know what's just in front of me, but that's about it. And then, you know, I find out as I go along. But so yeah, I've been
I
doing.
mean, yeah, it sounds like an interesting novel, even though I sort of have no idea what it's about.
I, me neither. Yeah, not really. But I do have a strong sense of the characters, so usually that's
That's usually a good sign,
a
yeah.
good sign. Yeah, yeah. So I'm kind of seeing where the characters go, and that I think that'll help me along. So yeah, that's what I'm working on right now. So it's going to be a longish project.
I mean, I guess it's early days, so it's hard to really say, but have you sort of noticed the differences between the novel form and the short story form and sort of been trying to get used to it? I know I did because I consider myself I'm very good with short stories, but when it comes to
Yeah.
longer stuff, that's like I'm trying to do it.
Yeah, yeah, that is, yeah, that's very true. I mean, I'm primarily a short story writer. I do write other stuff. I do write poetry and things like that, but I started off as a short story writer, and it's where I'm most comfortable in. But yeah, you're right. It's that having to slow yourself down but I have noticed just generally in my writing that my writing, like word count wise, is getting longer and longer and longer. So I think this feels like a natural, and I've always been a novel reader as well. I mean, I read a lot of short stories, but I also read novels, and this feels like a natural progression. Like I was already getting, my work was getting longer and longer as time was going on. But I do think that, well, I know that this novel will have multiple viewpoints. I don't think it's going to be a, one person telling the story all the way through. I don't think it's going to be that. There is going to be like, I think there's going to be about three.
I mean, those are pretty hard to do. I have a trunked novel I wrote that was only from one person's point of view, and it's very hard. I feel like you actually have to just have written other novels ahead of time, or, it's hard
Yeah,
to do.
yeah, yeah. I don't think I'm ready for that yet. That's not on the cards with this one. It looks like it's going to have multiple viewpoints. Just because, I mean, I like that kind of writing anyway, and I like reading novels like that. I like multiple viewpoints, and I like, non-linear stories. So really, I'm writing the kind of stuff that I like reading. So that makes it a bit easier.
No, I think that's a good rule of thumb is like, would you want to read it? And if the answer is no, it's usually like, maybe I shouldn't be writing
Yeah,
this.
yeah. So that's what I'm aiming for right now.
Nice. So I do a thing. I ask what I call random ass questions. I just make them up on the spot. They're really nothing to. I say they're nothing to do with anything, but it's sort of impossible to have an actual random question because everything's informed by something else.
Okay.
But they're at least somewhat off topic. Is there any food you miss from England that we just don't do well in America?
Yeah. Fish and chips, definitely. Fish, chips, mushy peas. Yeah, yeah. And I miss like this is a very Yorkshire thing. Yorkshire puddings, like Sunday dinner with the Yorkshire pudding. I think they call them popovers here, but they're not the same. But fish chips and mushy peas from a fish and chip shop is definitely it.
Okay, so what? I assume mushy peas is just like kind of like mashed potatoes, but with peas.
Yeah, kind of. It's the various there's a lot of salt in them and it's like just yeah, they're more of a sauce than a pea by that point.
Okay. So what is it specifically about the fish and chips from England that makes them superior to the American counterpoint? Do you think it's the oil they're cooked in, or is it the presentation, or what?
So I mean, it's definitely not the presentation. Like they're just like slopped on a plate, so it's definitely not presentation. And it's not. I don't know because it's hard to make them at home the same way that they. I mean, because it's an incredibly like greasy, kind of bland food. That's all. Everything's like deep fried. So I don't know exactly, but it's just I've never been able, and I think the batter around the fish is different, like the coating. So I've never been able to I've never been able to replicate it or have the same thing. Than just going to a fish and chip shop at home. So I think a lot of nostalgia. It's a lot of nostalgia as well, and the fact I can't just go and get it. If I was living back in England, I didn't go and eat fish and chips all the time. But part of it's because I know I can't get it.
Right. I have that for Chinese food. For some reason, at least in Massachusetts, we have these things called Peking ravioli. And I won't go into too long of a history lesson, but essentially,
Yeah,
you can't really find them anywhere else in the country because they came about because the Chinese and the Italians
yeah,
were living close together, and it was like basically like a combining of the two cuisines
yeah,
to make this Peking ravioli because it's basically it's just a dumpling, but it's like a very specific kind of breaded dumpling. And also everyone's so healthy out in the West that they don't, like I'll get Chinese food and it's got like more vegetables than usual and it's not as deeply fried. And I'm like, well, that's not Chinese food. And also, yeah, similar with clam chowder. And also similar where I've tried to make it at
yeah,
home and I just can't entirely replicate it. I think it's because in the restaurants, obviously they
yeah.
probably just pour the salt in like crazy, but I think they use salt pork or something like that. And I don't know, it's just sort of hard to find. So you work in a library, right?
I do. Yeah.
What's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to you at work, if you're willing to say?
A lot of it I can't say, but let's see. Weirdest thing that's happened to me at work. See the thing. Oh, there was one. This is not really the weirdest thing, but this is the only thing that I can talk about. One Saturday, I went into work and there was there was a bat in the library, and we had this whole like it was like some kind of it was like a I don't know, well, like, it was like some kind of comedy sketch where we had to get, there was a bat, and then we didn't know what to do with it, but we couldn't keep letting the public in, and we had to keep open. And I was in charge because, of course, I'm in charge when a bat is in the library. And we ended up getting the wildlife guy, but he was like 100 years old, and he came in big, and it was right at the top of the ladder, top of the library, which was like 3 stories of a normal house, like really high up. So he's waving around with this ladder, and
Oh,
yeah, because he must have been like he wasn't the he must have been like the substitute wildlife guy because it was like Saturday or something, and he was waving around on the ladder, and he knocked it off into a net, and we were like yeah, we were holding our breath the whole time, but the bat was managed to be relocated. The problem, I mean, the thing is with libraries, it's one of the things I really like about it because the thing about libraries is they're for everyone and everyone can come in. So you have like really bizarre things happen all the time, but you can't talk about them because, for people's privacy. But that's one of the things I love about it. It's like, it's really, even the people who work there's loads of eccentric people working in libraries, and it's one of the best things. But I work in our town, our public library in our town, and we're like a small to medium-ish
right,
library.
yeah.
So, it's a really nice place to work. Lots of nice people, come in. So I'm very lucky. So I've got friends who work in like inner city libraries, and they'll be like, "Oh, someone set fire to the computers again." And yeah, yeah. So, and I'll be like, we because my complaints are stuff like, well, we put this jigsaw out for everyone to make, and someone keeps tidying it away. Like that's the things that happen. Like I have people who are too conscientious and tidy things away that I don't want them to. So I'm very lucky in that way that I work in a library where it's like everybody is lovely. But yeah, we had a bat. Yeah, we have a lot of animals. So we have like the bat came in. We've had to relocate a couple of snapping turtles because we're next to the river. things like that. We have a lot of it's very Maine. We have a lot of animal related things that we end up having to sort out. But yeah, I'm pretty lucky that it's not.
Yeah, no, I mean there's definitely inner city problems versus like smaller city or suburb problems. Well, I guess this isn't so random, but what's your favorite part about Maine? Just personally, what's your
My
favorite part?
favorite part about Maine is when I step outside of my house um and it's fall, or it's nearly fall, and it's that when it starts to get that. Oh, two things. So this is the first one. The first one is, you step outside and it's kind of misty, and we live surrounded by trees, and so my house genuinely looks like something off a movie, like it's genuinely quite spooky, and so that I can look up my driveway and it looks like something that I'd only ever seen on movies before. And so that's my favorite thing when I look at where I live, and it's like, yeah, this looks like still from a Stephen King movie, and I love that. I also love fireflies because I'd never seen them before I came here. So there's a magical time in the summer. There's like 1 week in the summer where I can stand outside and the yard looks like a Studio Ghibli film, and it's magical to me because obviously I didn't grow up with fireflies at all. So yeah, they're my two favorite things, which is nice because they're literally on my doorstep. So
Yeah, it's not you don't have to go that far.
yeah, I really love where I live. It's like one of the like great joys of my life living here. Yeah,
That is another thing about leaving New England is like there's just no competing with the fall. Like, we get the aspens change color, but like we don't get the
yeah,
same kind of like incredible foliage and it's just like
yeah,
a different vibe. It's like New England is all about fall. And New Mexico, understandably, is like, who cares? Like, it's just
yeah,
another season. But there are trade-offs. It's like the sky is, I don't even know how to describe it right. The sky is bigger around here. That doesn't make
yeah.
sense.
No, no, I know exactly what you mean.
But it
Yeah,
yeah, it's like and also I can drive 10 minutes in any direction and be like literally in the middle of the desert nowhere. So it's both good and, as you said earlier, it's like, cool, I could die out here and no one would know.
yeah, and that's the thing about fall. I love fall, but it means that winter's coming, and I'm not that big a fan of the snow. Like, if I could stay at home all the time and not have to go out, then I'd like the snow fine. But having to go out in it and having to, dig out your car every morning and all that, yeah, I'd rather,
That is the worst part, yeah, because like I like going back. I go back for Christmas, for instance, and it's nice. Like, oh, look at the snow and it's all that. But it's like I don't have, people are driving me around. I don't have to dig out a
yeah,
car and do all this other
yeah,
stuff. It's very different when you have to be the one that scrapes the windshield every morning, or like digs out your car, or has to make sure that the black ice is
yeah.
gone.
That's the thing I don't like about it. Like, I'm just not. I mean, people from back home when they figured out I was moving to Maine, they were like, "You hate snow." And I'm like, "I know," but the rest of the year just totally makes up for it.
Yeah, I mean, my equivalent would be the summer is. I mean, ironically, it's not much hotter than back in New England, or at least in Massachusetts. People talk about like, oh, it's so. Why would you want to move to a desert? It's so hot. And then if you actually do the comparison, like there'll be days it's 90 here and like 93 in Massachusetts, but there's no humidity here.
That's the thing. At least it's dry, right? It's a dry heat.
Yeah, we have mostly dry except for the rainy season, which is about a month and a half, where we get most of the rainfall for the entire year,
Yeah,
which is about end of July or maybe mid-August to September. It's not a set time.
yeah,
But yeah, the flip side is like, so like the summer here is like the winter in New England, but then the rest of the year I'm like, this is great.
yeah.
So yeah. So I've run out of things to say. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
If you want to do a specific plug for your book or anything that's coming up, why don't you do that now?
Okay, so Dark Blood Comes from the Feet is 17 short stories, and it can be found in most places where you buy books. But if you get a chance to buy it from your local bookstore, that would be awesome. So check it out.
I am the owner and operator of NICTITATING Books. The first NICTITATING book happens to be my own, my first full-length collection called Screaming Creatures. It's on Amazon. If you like it, please leave an Amazon or Goodreads review. And I am, I guess for an update, working on a novella about aliens that I finished a first draft of, which will most likely be out around December. Paula Ashe has a novelette that's probably going to be out a little before that. These are rough dates. But yeah, stay tuned. We got a lot of interesting stuff coming out. Well, again, thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. And thank you for inviting me. This was great. And I'll have to get you a novella if it's about aliens. That'll help me with that.
And yeah, yeah, thanks for coming on.